Hello friends, so today we're gonna be going over core data. So first let's start from SQLite. So what exactly SQLite? SQLite is a singleton file. Is a single file. This is basically SQL made for cell phone, which is a lighter version of SQL made for cell phones. So it's much more lighter and it's pretty fast and it comes bundled in iOS. But the problem is this is C API, and we guys love to use object oriented programming. So we use core data. Core data is just an interface between the application and the SQLite database. So core data is an interface between the application and the SQLite database. So you ask the core data to perform stuff for you, and then in the background, the core data is making the queries for you for a database. So this is basically like object oriented stuff. So let's start by making core data project. So open a new project. Let's say mm, let's say file new project. Open a new project. Okay. Core data try. And surely like remember to check mark the use core data. Hit next. Okay. I have an account, so it's fine if you don't have one. Let's get started. So uh, let's keep on reading the steps. um, First we make actually now you will see like once you like check the core data part, you will see the code is added. So basically, so this core data stack is added for you: manage object context, manage object model, and all this stuff. And you will also see a data model made for you. So this is the core data object graph. So you will make the entities attribute inside the object map, and this will make the database in the background for you. Okay. So let's get started. So let's add an entity. Let's give it a name, table 1, and then let's give it a name column 1, and let's give it a value string. Okay, that's it. So this will make, and this is the two like graphs that you can see. This is the editor style, this is the graph style. So we have a table 1 which has the attribute column 1. Okay, so we made an entity. Entity is basically it maps to a table in the database and maps to an object in the code. So in your code you're making objects, and in the database there are tables. So entity is mapping the table to an object, and then we created attributes. So attribute maps to a column in the table and maps to a property in the object. Okay. So there are a lot of things like entities, attribute, relationships, but we're going to focus like just on entities, attributes, and relationships. How do you access the core data? So you need an NS object context. This is the main class, which is the hub around all the core data activity turns. Okay, so let's import this class app delegate. App delegate.h, and let's write this method view data appear. So basically this NS manage object context, it is a singleton class, and which is written over here. NS managing object context, this one. So we have to call this class, we have to call the shared session of this app delegate file, and then from there we're gonna get the manage object context. Okay, so let's call the app delegate start. Let's call the singleton object of the app delegate. The method is called UI application shared application, then you because this app delegate file, it is the delegate file for the UI application. Okay, so our ns manage object context is you call it by app ns manage object okay, manage object context. This is the one method I was looking for. Managed object context. Now this will return the ns manage context for you. Okay, now now this ns manage object context, you need to create and query objects in the database. So this is the main class, and this class will do the query for you. Okay, so now we need to insert objects to a database, right? So we instantiate this class ns managed object star object 1, and we have to give it a type ns entity description insert new object entity for name. So our entity name is what? You have to go back and look for it. Entity name is table1, and the table1 has the attribute column1. So you say table1 and then manage object context. So the context is context. Okay, now we call the method inside it, object1 set value for key. Now give the value uh, my first entry for key. Now the key is the column name, column1. Okay, now say context save. Let's give it a nil. Let's not print out the error. And now let's run the project and see how many errors we have. Okay, always run an iPhone 5 because it's faster. So we have no errors, and I believe it's running. So let's move on. Okay, so the value whatever stored. Now I believe that it's working. So let's get forward. So yeah, we're gonna check later. So basically, like over here you select whichever options you want, like ns string float, and then these will be mapped to objective C components like ns string, ns number, ns data. Now what will happen, so whenever you are working with this core data, the SQL statements will be generated automatically in the background. Okay, now you need to save, you need to call save, and because the change in the memory is only done when you call save, so keep on calling save after every regular changes. Or then you can also check whether it has, for the end object context, whether it has changes or not. So you have one way to check it. Yeah, but calling set value for key is pretty messy. So we can make a subclass of ns object, and then we can also like access it using properties, but we're not gonna access it right now. We're gonna do it later, so let's skip this part. Okay, so far you can just create objects in the database, right? So now we will see how to fetch it. So to fetch it, you have to instantiate the class ns fetch query. So let's make this class ns fetch request. You instantiate this. Now the request will have properties. dot entity, again the ns entity description, insert entity new. Okay, so insert new object entity for name in my object context, get a set properties with values of a key, properties in a custom subclass. Query, basically you need to able to retrieve objects from a database. You just create new ones. You do this by executing in your, so you basically create so you basically fetch objects from database using ns fetch request. Okay, now this ns fetch request has four important properties: ns entity description, of which entity to fetch, like entities can be a lot of them, right? A lot of tables, so you have to give the entity. You can give the ns predicate, like which entities to fetch. I mean, if you want a certain, if you want certain values or stuff. ns sort description is like in which order you want to be printed out. Then you can also set the bash fetch limit, bash limit or stuff. So now we will instantiate this class and set the properties. We can say entity for name. Now the entity has to be the same table 1, because we just created one table. And my object context. Now you can set the request dot fetch limit. Okay, now you can, so now let's just print it out. So context execute fetch request, and you say request error is nil, ns log comma argue fetch request. Okay, so this one returns you ns, because you have to store it somewhere, right? So now this should give two entries. Okay, so see, you're gonna see faulting, right? On data is first entry. So now to remove the faulting, you have to say request set fault. So now you have to print out. So now you say set return objects as false. No, because we don't want false. So basically, false are to like save your memory. It is basically like when you have same data. So instead of copy pasting data, it will show you, it will copy fault, that saying that the data is similar. And now we can say array, say object, say value for key. Okay, so it's working right now. These are my, let's just print out as second. So let's add multiple values to it second. Okay, so now we can add properties. So let's say request dot sort descriptors. Now sort descriptors takes an array, so you have to say array with object. Now in this one, array object will take ns sort descriptor with key. Now the key would be column, ascending yes. Now this will print out in order. Okay, and now if you say no, now this should print out in the opposite order. Okay, so it's in opposite order now. Now if you want just like specific entries, we have another request dot predicate. You say ns predicate with format, and now in this one you give name contains percentage ampersand, comma, you say this second. Now this will only print out the second entry. Okay, column 1. So instead of this name, change this to the column that you're looking for. So we are looking for the column 1, the attribute column name contains. This is the contains. So let's print it out. And now we should see only the second entries and not my first entry. Now if you change it to now we should see only my first entry and no second entry. See, so it's working. So let's get back to the properties. So we use the sort descriptor. So basically when you use the sort descriptor, so you init with key, so you say like so which column you want to sort it with, and then you also have an option to give selector, like if you want to write your own method to sort. Default is the method compare. Okay. uh, So now you have the class ns predicate. So ns predicate is basically like if you want particular values from the fetch request, like if you want unique id, so this is the syntax unique id. If you want to have something in relations, if you want to have something in ns date, like viewed more than this date, or if you want something in strings, this is the syntax in strings, putting it all together. So we have already put it all together, so and the code works as we can see. Now deleting object, if you want to delete objects, so if you want to delete single object, you can just say ns manage object context delete object and object. So now we can check this one. So now you can say just say array. Right now we printing. Now we can also print array dot count, and over here we can stop giving adding and we can stop adding objects to the database. So now we can just say count is, so we have 6 objects in total in our no, we have to remove the predicate part. So we have 14 objects total. Now we can delete objects by saying, so for deleting the objects you need to use this nh batch request. Right now as you can see we have 3 entries. Then let's have this ns batch delete request delete. You give the request and then you execute it, and over here you removed our context. Now you print it out. Again now print it out. So now it's empty. That's how you delete all the whole code data stuff. Now let's add some. Rerun it. Okay, so at least we have 2 entries in our database. Okay, now let's try to access this class using subclass. So we make it a subclass table1, then you hit next, and now it will create certain files for you. So basically these files lets you to access, because what happens, so the set value for key are pretty messy methods. So instead of using these, now let's import this. Import table1. Okay, and now since we did that, so now we can just instantiate these ones. So we can say table1 star obj1. Basically, so we are going to be making objects of these classes now. And now you can just simply say object1 dot column1 equals to third entry. Okay, now if you hit run, why did it fail? Okay, so there is something wrong. So let's just delete my relation. We're just going to talk about relation just right now. Okay, so it works, third entry. And now you can also store it. So now you can also say the enumeration. So you can say table1 star obj in array. You can just simply use nslog as nslog percentage ampersand column1 dot column1. Not obj1, it's obj. And this will print out all the entries. Okay, so you're basically able to use dot notation using these things, using these ns objects. Okay, now let's delete these ones. Go to the core data, add a new entity, name it table2. Now we're setting relations. Okay, so now you can just add, okay, not in this one. Now let's name everything over here column2 and hit control over here, control, and then set relations. Okay, you can just say table1 relation, and in this one you can just say table2 relation. Okay, or table1 and table2. Now again do the create my object subclass. Now, but there's a bug in over here, that this one should be table2 and not ns object. So again, delete these classes, move to trash, go to the object model editor, create ns object, table2. Okay, so this should be table2 and not table1. Okay, table2. Okay, now it works. Now in your storyboard you can set the relations. So like you over here, you have the same thing, you can do the same thing over here. So now we're going to be making object 2 of time table2. Over here also say table2. Okay, and now over here you say table2 and you say column2 th. Okay, fourth entry, and then username again column1. Okay, probably we did something wrong again. We have not specified over here. Column 2. Give it a type string. Okay. let's remove, the only way is to just remove these ones. Product editor, and so now you just create it again, table 1, table 1. Okay, now it seems to work. Now you should be able to print it out. Column 1, now there should be column 2. Okay, so this should be object 2 probably. Now this will be column 2. And now you can just say object 1 dot relation table 1 relation equals to object 2. So now you're setting the relation, okay? And now when you print it out, you should also see, no, you will not right now see, okay? Now so we have made a table 1, now we have made a table 2, and then we have also set the table. So 420 is only in table 2, and we have set the relation table 1 dot relation equals to table 2, and then we say save. So here we try to print it out the name, the column 1, because this is of type table 1, okay? So it works. And now we try to print out the relation table 1 relation dot column 2. Now this is of type column 2, so we should only see 4th entry. See, now we can see 4th entry. Okay guys, so this is it for core data. So we, using core data, we were able to put like entries in our table, fetch it using NSFetch request, and then we made it a subclass, and then we set relations. So guys, if you like my video, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.